Welcome to the Tom Matt Show. You are walking through the front door of the refirement zone. And now, your host, Tom Matt.
Last week, Rob Helm was here. Functional Remodeling, a DIY show. I don't do a lot of DIY shows. I want to do more of those because any way we can help people with education and entertaining and help you save some money, that's a win-win-win across the board. So check that one out, Rob Helm, and he's an entrepreneur as well. He's been a general contractor for 25 years, but he's also he's an inventor. And we talked about his refirement journey, as I like to say, with everybody who's coming up on milestone birthdays. He's coming up, he's in his late 40s. And I said, so, the question I asked him was, what are you going to do at 50? What are you going to do at 55? What are you going to do at 60? You need to think about these milestone birthdays because today's episode is a perfect example of why. Dementia Prevention, we're calling this, just like the book from my friend, Dr. Mitchell Clionsky. Let me get your bio out here, which is long, lengthy, because he's a very, very knowledgeable man. Dr. Mitchell Clionsky, PhD, board-certified neuropsychologist, super smart, who specializes in evaluating and treating patients with cognitive impairment, dementia, ADHD, and traumatic brain injury. Husband and wife team with Emily Clionsky, MD. They have combined 70 years of professional and clinical experience in medicine and neuropsychology. Thank goodness we have doctors like the Clionsky team. All right. They've treated over 20,000 patients going strong. They partner at private practice, the Clionsky Neurosystems, Inc., based in Springfield, Massachusetts. They are experienced public speakers, podcast guests, thank goodness, workshop presenters, and general professional audiences. You can go to the website. We'll give that to you here. You know how we all do that in the fifth segment, everybody. But I want to welcome, we're gonna have a really nice conversation with my friend Dr. Mitch coming in here. Dr. Mitchell Clionsky, Dementia Prevention. Mitch, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for sending me your book, and we'll have more to talk about all of that as we move through this episode. I appreciate you very much. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Tom. I look forward to it.
My pleasure. It's usually we do the This Is Your Life portion of this radio program. That's how everybody's used to this show. So we like to just talk about family, kids, where you're from, all that kind of stuff, just to get you warmed up. So please we've got time here. Let's roll through it. Get everybody to know who you are, and please share all of your information. I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about that. Go ahead.
Well, I was born and raised in central Pennsylvania. Went to Dickinson College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and then wanted to go to graduate school. Discovered that I was the first student that anyone knew of who actually wanted to become a psychologist coming out of Dickinson College. Everyone went there to become a lawyer. And I started that way and realized a couple years into it that psychology was much more interesting. So I set out a bunch of resumes and applications to different schools. And basically, it was crickets. I didn't hear very much. So being who I am, I decided that I was going to try to push things a little bit. Got myself a ticket to go out to the Midwestern Psychological Association convention, where one of the schools that was top on my list, Bowling Green State University, was no doubt sending people to participate in the conference. So I went out there and started buttonholing people and saying, hey, I'm really interested in coming to your graduate school. Here's who I am. And I shook so many hands that eventually about 2-3 months later, when there was an opening in the program, they called me up, accepted me into the program. So I was sort of a late entry. I didn't get in until the middle of the summer. They said, there's one condition for you coming in. I said, what's that? Do I have to get a job? They said, no, we've got funding for you. This is back in the days where there was money in the graduate professions. I said, what's the condition? He said, well, every year that you're here, you have to do a talk for all of our psychology seniors, telling them how to get into graduate school. So I said, that's a deal. Happy to do that. And I did. And it was always a lot of fun because I really feel that in many ways in life, what you accomplish is based on how you put yourself out there. And the people who wait for things to happen are oftentimes losing out.
I agree so much on that. Talking to students, it's so much fun talking to students and giving them advice. They really do want us, and we just talked about this pre-show, everybody, with Dr. Mitch. We're talking about, giving back to our young people and why we need to take care of ourselves, because they really need us to help guide them, and don't be afraid to reach out to our young people. So that's a pretty sweet story. How many times did you give that speech?
4 times. I was in graduate school for 4 years.
Cool.
Then went off to internship in Los Angeles. Then came to Western Massachusetts for a year. That was 45 years ago. Sometimes you go someplace, you don't know what the next step is, but you find opportunities and you develop. I started the first neuropsychology laboratory, which means, for people who don't know neuropsychology, basically we test how people think. So we look at how well they pay attention. We give them tests of short-term memory to see how well they're able to learn and hold on to new things. We look at their problem-solving skills, their intelligence, their communication ability, and their emotional state. And then we use those test results to compare them with people of the same age and background, which is really important, because that's where your target should be, is, are you up to snuff? Not are you perfect, because none of us have perfect thinking abilities, but rather, is it, quote, normal for someone like you? So using that information, we're then able to make diagnoses. We're able to help them develop plans. We're able to make recommendations to physicians for various tests, medications, other kinds of therapies that someone might need or want. And so I started that first lab. It was actually part-time while I was working on the inpatient psychiatric unit for about 7 years. And then I went into private practice, and I really haven't looked back since then, and have just expanded my practice over the course of these, at this point, private practice for going on 40 years, and have trained a number of postdoctoral residents as well as students. And I'm still enjoying it just as much today as when I started out, because every day's new, every day's something exciting.
And that's the way you want to live your life, everybody. We talk about these things, and this when we share these stories on this radio program. Our guest today is Dr. Mitchell Clionsky, Dementia Prevention. We're going to talk a lot about Dr. Mitch's book. Mitch, your wife is a physician as well. How important was it to have your wife as a physician and have this collaborative effort through all of these years? It had to be pretty strong. What do you feel about that?
Well, it was really, really important. Emily is an incredible woman who has had a number of lives. At age 42, she decided, after a career selling to large-scale companies a variety of different computer products, including mainframe computers and what at that point passed for artificial intelligence products, that she was going to become a physician. So at age 42, she decides to become a physician. Now, this is before we're married. And there's only one problem, which is she didn't have a college degree, and she had been an English major. So in the course of 1 year, she took all of the science prerequisites by going to 3 different colleges simultaneously and entered Thomas Jefferson Medical School in Philadelphia. They only took 2 older students every year. So she's sitting there in this whole class with students who are, by and large, her children's age. And she became an internal medicine doctor first, then went down to the poorest county in North and South Carolina, ended up working there, and then took a second residency in psychiatry. So that's how her path and my path got back together.
Unbelievable story. I love it so much. Being a non-traditional education person myself, I totally embrace what she's saying, because I was the old ugly duckling in the front of classes at Michigan State University through all of my 40s for 9 years. I'm going to carry this through, Mitch, because we're going to come up to break here. Let me reset this. Dr. Mitchell Clionsky is with us, everybody. Dementia Prevention is his book. We're going to talk about this, the title of the episode today. You want to listen to this, and if you miss any portion of the radio broadcast, please pick up the podcast and bookmark this thing, and you're going to want to get this book. I'll tell you the story about my book and what we're doing here in our home when we come back. You're listening to The Tom Matz Show.
This segment of The Tom Matz Show is brought to you in part by The Source of Light and Power by band leader Ark of All and broadcaster Mitch Anderson. Hear the sound that is endorsed by Odyssey headphones, linear tube audio, RME converters, and Peluso microphones at sourceoflightandpower.bandcamp.com. This is the Tom Matt Show.
This segment of the Tom Matt Show is sponsored by Craig Stiles of Ameriprise Financial. Thank goodness. Craig's been with us for many years now, helping us. And also, full disclosure, as I say on every episode, because I want to be completely transparent with our audience, we have all of our retirement zone savings with Craig and Ameriprise Financial, because I really, you got to find the people you trust to manage your money. You save your money, you work all your career, all these years, Sandy and I had all these years together and working our butts off and doing these things and doing all the right things. We want to do this. We have our own purpose here, as I was just saying in the previous segment. Craig is enabling us to be able to do this, not only through his sponsorship, but through his managing of our funds. And we hope that you will reach out to him, because he is our financial advisor, and we hope he will become yours too well into the future with the right financial advisor. Life can be brilliant. Phone numbers coming at you here. Call Craig, 1-800-528-1355, 517-483-4893. This is a local number. Craig.stiles@ampf.com is his email. Offices are located 2400 Lake Lansing Road, Suite B is in Brilliant, or B is Lansing, Michigan 48912. That's the thing with our sponsors. They're nationally networked. And so if you're in California or you're in Florida or Texas or someplace and you're listening to this podcast or the radio program, however you're picking it up on the stream, don't be afraid to reach out to any of our sponsors, because they will help you. And at the bottom of our homepage, of course, is all of the banners for our sponsors and some other of our friends that we want to support. Also, all of our sponsors are quarterly visitors to the radio program, and they have their own section on our website. Financial Fitness, the Law Dog with Jamie White, and then Reality Real Estate with Brock. All of them have a nice presence in our world. Radio stations that have carried us in the past still carry us on the Michigan Talk Network. WGHN 92.1 FM in Grand Haven carried us for a long time. Lakeshore of Lake Michigan. WGIM 1240 AM in Lansing, Michigan. The flagship of the Michigan Talk Network. WJRW 1340 AM in Grand Rapids, Michigan. WKOQ 1490 Muskegon, Whitehall. WYPV FM 94.5 Mackinac City. And, of course, the big flamethrower at Michigan State University, our PBS affiliate, WKAR AM 870 News Talk, and it's simulcast on 102.3 FM in East Lansing, Michigan. Thank you again to Craig Stiles for creating Destiny Analytics, his proprietary algorithm that helps put you over the top with all of his choices and the tools in his toolbox. And lastly, I want to say thank you to Steve and Ivy Gruber, the owners of the Michigan Talk Network, for carrying us for the last many years now on their syndication. We're very grateful for all of that, and we want to continue to bring you great guests like we have today. Dr. Mitch Clionsky is with us today, PhD board-certified neuropsychologist, talking about his book, Dementia Prevention. And let me tell you guys, once I cracked this book open, I couldn't put it down. It was so good. I wound up ordering a print version so I can highlight it, so I can have my playbook. So I have 2 copies. Haven't got the print version yet because I'm almost done with the digital version. And I'm just telling you the truth. You know me, I'm all about reading these books. And it's like, this is a great book. And I've read a lot of Alzheimer's dementia stuff. And I haven't done a lot of Alzheimer's dementia shows since we did so many of them early on in the radio show. And I'm very, very grateful that LinkedIn exists, and Dr. Mitch and I connected on LinkedIn, and he's got a huge presence on LinkedIn. So any of this, you're going to want to get this book. Let's start right at the top, Mitch. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You've got this interview set up for me easy. Nature and origin of dementia, to define it. Would you please kind of just peel that back, and let's just start right at the top of the book?
Happy to do so. Probably the biggest question that we get asked when we do talks is it dementia or is it Alzheimer's disease? And I tell them, well, it could be both. They say, what? And I say, well, look at it as a brand. Alzheimer's is like a brand of dementia, in the same way Ford is a brand of automobile. Toyota is a brand of automobile. They share a lot of unique characteristics, but also a lot of commonalities. Well, Alzheimer's disease has become the most well-known dementia, but there are a number of other types, and many of them really have about the same importance. Vascular dementia, hardening of the arteries, as we used to call it, having to do with blood flow to our brain, is equally and perhaps in some ways even more important than pure Alzheimer's disease, and oftentimes occurs with it. You can also see dementias, and let me define that for you. Dementia is a progressive decline in thinking and behavior. So it's neurologically based. It's a brain disease. It's not a psychiatric condition. It's not people living their lives poorly. It is a change in how our brains work. So Alzheimer's is the one that is typically associated with particular changes inside the brain called plaques and tangles. The changes in vascular dementia primarily have to do with the blood vessels and the nerves around them as they get to the internal parts of our brain. But you can also have dementia from too much alcohol as a consequence of Parkinson's disease, because about a third of the people with Parkinson's, a movement disorder, also lose thinking abilities. We all know these days about the risks of too many head traumas, a condition they call chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. And many of us are also aware of things like frontotemporal dementia, what has been popularized really through the life of Bruce Willis, who has a different form of dementia that oftentimes comes on earlier. Because dementia, by and large, is a disease of aging. In your 60s, your risk of getting dementia is really only about 10%. That's substantial, but still pretty low. By the time you get into your mid-70s, it doubles. And by the time you get to your mid-80s, if you make it, you're running about a 40% risk. So the issue here is, what can I do to change that for me? How do I head this off?
What can I do to change me? Well, let's talk about all of that, because that's the $1 million question here, everybody. And this book, again, as I said, it's more like a playbook. To me, it was more like a playbook because of what Dr. Mitch has done. He's created these really cool flow charts, and he keeps adding to the flow chart throughout the book. And Mitch, we got a minute to go before we go to break, and I want you to be able to set this up. One of the things that we're going to come back to is that beer can winding road analogy you told me about yesterday. You got enough time to share that story. Would you share that story quickly, please?
Yeah, sure. Currently, most of the action in terms of new drugs are being developed by major pharmaceutical companies to try to remove those plaques and tangles from the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease. And while they've been really good at being able to remove the plaques and tangles, it's not improved anyone's thinking ability. So I was telling you, Tom, that it's sort of like finding this curvy road where there's lots of accidents, and you notice there's all these beer cans along the side of the road. And so your thought is, I'll clean up the beer cans and make the road safer. Guess what? Doesn't work that way, does it?
No, it doesn't. And that's thank you for being so concise with that. That's a really great analogy, everybody. And we're going to carry this through. Dementia Prevention is the title of today's episode. Dr. Mitchell Clionsky is with me today. This is going to be a great show. You really need to stay on top of this because of the cost of care and the preventative options because you have options. You're listening to the Tom Mann Show.
Thank you again to our Segment 2 sponsor, Craig Stiles of Ameriprise Financial. For more information on services provided by Craig, please visit ameripriseadvisors.com/craig.stiles or by calling 517-483-4893. You're tuned in to The Tom Mann Show.
Third segment of the Tom Mann Show is sponsored by Jamie White Law. Was just here a couple weeks ago. Jamie's awesome. If you missed that first episode with Jamie where he told a story about how he got into the law business with his dad and this incident that occurred in the 70s, this racial confrontation that happened because Jamie's biracial, and his dad was almost killed in a fight. unbelievable story. I had no idea it was coming. I mean, I had no idea. That's what's so cool about doing this radio show, because we're very spontaneous with everything. So I appreciate Jamie, and I appreciate his sponsorship very much of this segment, because it helps us tremendously. White Law PLLC. They're good people. You can trust them. It's where justice meets compassion. Great tagline. White Law is your advocate and my advocate in times of need. They are here to listen, support, and fight for what you deserve. They're good people, just good people. Contact White Law today for your free consultation at whitelawpllc.com. Great website. One of the best websites I've really encountered recently, because it's not so busy that you can't figure out what the heck's going on there, but it's very well done. And it's easy to communicate. And that's the whole thing about communication nowadays. If we can't communicate in these busy times that we live in, then we're doomed. Contact again, whitelawpllc.com, or call them 517-777-9785. Again, that's Jamie White, White Law, sponsor of the third segment of the Tom Matt Show. Back to today's episode, Dr. Mitchell Clionsky joining us from
Western Massachusetts.
45 years strong. Dementia Prevention is the name of his book. And if you just joined us, Dr. Mitch was talking about some of the the origin of dementia and the branding of the dementia Alzheimer's condition. Check that out. We're going to roll into the second part of his book, which again, I'm going to tell you guys, I read most of the digital version and immediately asked Sandy to buy the print version, because I want to have the playbook on hand so I can go back through it again and highlight it, because I'm absolutely going to invite Dr. Mitch back again to continue this conversation on this. This is a very, very important topic. Before we jump into the dementia risk model, Dr. Mitch, we talked pre-show a little bit about the cost of care. Let's just kind of throw that out there quickly, just to let people know what we're looking at. And we're just talking not on the global cost that I found, but because you weren't, that's okay. But the average cost, people can you might potentially see these costs. You want to just kind of share that info with people, please?
Yeah, there's the financial cost, which I'll get to in a second, but I think even greater than that is the personal cost of dementia. When people develop one of these kinds of deteriorating conditions, they really lose themselves in many cases as a result of the disease. People who are competent, people who are able to take on the world, become dependent, unable to do even basic things for themselves in the later stages, which means that it's not just a disease of that individual, but a disease of their family and oftentimes their community. When you look at what the financial cost is, the current estimates are in someone's lifetime, if they get dementia, we're talking about $250,000 of care, between personal care, between the cost of family members who have to stay home instead of going to work. Then you're dealing with things like assisted living, and in many cases also at the end stages in nursing homes. So it's incredibly expensive from that dimension as well. But it's something which can be avoided, and that's what I hope we're going to really focus on, because 1 out of 2 cases of dementia is preventable, and that's, for me, the real positive statement out of all of this. It is something that's terrible. It's something that you want to avoid in all ways, but it's not going to happen just by wishing it so. You're really going to have to take a look at what you can do.
Well, I like 50% odds. I'll take that any day. I mean, any day. Mm-hmm. 1 out of 2 cases preventable. And thank you for mentioning the personal cost, because caregiving is very, very challenging. And the patient, the loved one, it affects the whole family situation and your friends. And so keep these in mind. We went through it with my mother-in-law, and it was a very long 2 years that we had to endure. Love her to death. She brought Sandy and I together. That's another whole story. Okay, let's talk about the dementia risk. And thank you for sharing that, Mitch. Dementia risk model, part 2 of the book, everybody. And as I said, you really want to check this book out, because as we're growing older, as we have more technologies, as we know more about nutrition, all of these things, we are living longer. We have better health care. However, with longer lifespans comes some topics that we need to discuss. It could be a tough topic, and we're going to discuss it. Dementia Risk Model is part 2 of the book. Go ahead, start that whole thread, would you please, Mitch? And let's start peeling it back for people. Let them understand how they could be perhaps one of those 50% people that's preventable.
When you look at your feed from your Google or any of your social media, what you're going to see is a lot of headlines. Eat this to prevent dementia. Do this to prevent dementia. I get asked all the time, what's the one thing I could do, Doc, in order to reduce my risk of dementia? And aside from my tongue-in-cheek response, which is buy the book and read it, the real answer is there isn't one thing. There's a number of things which together all influence your chances of having this happen to you. So in order to get this information, we really had to look far and wide because it doesn't exist in one place. There are no dementiologists, interestingly enough. There are people who are neurologists who look at dementia as part of seizures that they also treat, head injuries, all kinds of different things. Psychiatrists who treat this, but also treat, depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. There's endocrinologists because diabetes is a leading cause of dementia. There's cardiologists because high blood pressure, atrial fibrillation are all medical causes for this. So you start to look far and wide, you get into exercise physiology, you get into psychology, and what you realize is one of the reasons that it's so hard for people to wrap their arms around this is that it comes from so many different places. Our job together, Emily and I, was to read all of the relevant information that's proven. We're talking about real hard science. And then, because it's so dense and frankly, pretty boring, translated into interesting kind of language that people who don't have a doctorate degree can understand and use. So that was the way in which we built this model, chapter by chapter, starting with genetics, moving on to early life situations, head injuries, early life deprivations, moving up through things that happen during your midlife, and later on throughout your life. So there's a whole bunch of different, basically 20 different factors that are all important in our model.
When you set up the flow charts in your book, I keep going back to this because I'm such a flow chart kind of honk on this stuff. Why did you set up the pictures like that? And then we could talk about later how you're expanding the website so that you can have that flow chart for people to use very soon. But what triggered that in your mind? What was the impetus behind that?
There wasn't one before this. That was the first reason. And because I think visually, I said, we have to present this in a way that makes sense so people can look at where they are and analyze the various inputs. And then that was really important and took quite a while. I'm still not sure I have all the different components exactly where I want them, because the other point here is that once you get all these different components, you realize that they just don't each individually impact your risk, but they interact with many others. So for example, if you're sedentary, if you don't exercise, if you don't move, you're likely to be overweight as well as out of shape. You're much more likely to have high blood pressure or diabetes, and you're more likely to have other conditions, including things like sleep apnea. So they all fit together, and we have to look at them as such.
We will come back and talk about all of these things, especially when it comes to sleep, all of these different variables that go into this very complex topic. My guest today, Dr. Mitchell Clionsky, calling this episode Dementia Prevention. You're listening to The Tom Matt Show.
Thank you again to our segment 3 sponsor, White Law PLLC, where justice meets compassion. White Law is your advocate in times of need. We are here to listen, support, and fight for what you deserve. Contact White Law today for your free consultation. Visit us at whitelawpllc.com or call 517-777-9785. This is The Tom Matt Show.
Love doing episodes like this, everybody, so much. Just to bring the entertaining, educational value to you and how you can have some tips for your life. Unbelievable. Oh, I'll tell you, Brock Fletcher is the sponsor of this segment. Selling team of Keller Williams Realty. Brock is the king. Great guy. Love him. He's so helpful. nicest guy you want to meet. All of our sponsors are great. All of our guests are great. I mean, it's just, we're fortunate to have and be able to have license to do this radio program. And I'll tell you what, I appreciate everybody so much, especially our sponsors, but in addition to our guests and all of our listeners and fans of the show. Call Brock Fletcher. And again, full disclosure, he helped us sell Big House Holt, our dream home, which we never thought we'd ever sell that giant place. And we put so much love and care into that. I can't even tell you. It was time to go. The kids moved on. You know, you got this giant place, and it's like, okay, what are we going to do here? Brock helped get us straight on all of that. Call him. 517-853-6408 is the office number. And then there's the cell phone number, Brock's personal cell phone number. Text him, call him, leave him a voicemail, 517-303-3262, or go online to kwsellingteam.com. I'm going to give you that phone number one more time because Brock is really good about returning calls or text messages. And please tell him you heard it from Tommy on the radio program or the podcast, because that helps him determine where he's going to invest his marketing dollars, because he is a big investor in marketing to help you get your job done, get your house sold, get your new home that you want to buy. He invests way ahead of time before he gets your listing. That's where you want to go, kwsellingteam.com, the selling team of Keller Williams. And as I said, so many agents out there, real estate agents, they wait until they get your listing before they fund any money to do some advertising. Brock is way ahead of the game on all of that. And the lastly thing with Brock, he's a big time Spartan fan, and we love him for that as well. Back to our show today with my new friend, Dr. Mitch Clionsky. Love talking to smart people, and this is such a huge topic. The dementia, Alzheimer's condition and I have read this from way back in the day when we first started the radio show, everybody, way back in the day, that the Alzheimer's Alzheimer's condition could be the defining condition for the growing older population. Because as Dr. Mitch said earlier, he gave us the stats, 10% at 60, 20, 25% at 70. It continues to go up as we grow older. And I had learned that in the past. And so it is a age defined up to what, 40%, Mitch, you said, to 80s, 90s?
Mid-80s usually levels off at that point because people who are living longer at that point are really pretty healthy. So it doesn't go up much after that.
Well, that's the whole key thing here, because we were just talking about part 2 of the book, the risk model, and the things that we can do to really understand what's important, because there's so many variables. One of the things that jumped out to me in the book, Mitch, because selfishly, I have sleep apnea, and I've talked about sleep apnea a lot, but oxygen and sleep. And so can we go there and just do a quick bounce on that, please?
Absolutely. And I'm also a CPAP user. I've had sleep apnea diagnosed for about 18 years. And I consider it to be one of the seminal changes in my life, was finding out about this and then treating it. And it turns out that it's so much more common than people think. Just very recently, about 3 months ago, there was a big study that was published looking at 6,000 people drawn from the general population. Now, these are people who go in, they come from everybody in the world comes in from places like, to the Framingham Heart Study, to the Mayo Clinic studies, and they take them in their late 50s and they give them a bunch of tests. And then they follow them every 3 to 5 years for the rest of their lives. And they're looking at what happens to them. We learn a ton about normal aging through these studies. Well, this group decided to become a consortium and to pull together their data, gave everyone a one-night home sleep study in their own beds, little painless thing, wore something under their finger or under their nose for one night. And they looked at the data. Turns out that 50% of the people ages 58 and above, 1 out of 2 people, have at least mild sleep apnea. Now, mild does not mean insignificant. You probably know this, but it means that at least 5 times every hour, you either stop breathing for about 10 seconds or your oxygen levels drop by 4%. When you experience those kinds of declines in your breathing, if not enough air gets down your lungs, not enough oxygen can get pulled out of the air. Now, oxygen is only about 20% of the air. But what our lungs do is they pull out that 20%. They attach to red blood cells and that makes its way, which are our eyes and our brain. When we have enough oxygen, we're able to make energy molecules, adenosine triphosphate, ATP, and we're also able to clean out the toxins that build up during the day, the lymphatic system, which works while we're sleeping and flushes out those things so they don't build up. The most important thing is people who treat their sleep apnea, if they have it, think better, wake up fresher, have more energy, are more creative, and reduce their risk of dementia significantly. So I'm all for oxygen. I don't know about you. I'm sort of high on oxygen these days.
I totally, that it jumped out to me so much in the book, and I've actually started to really watch because I'm such an early morning person. And it's like, well, being in my retirement zone, Mitch, it's like, do I need to go to the gym at 6:30 or can I go to the gym at 7:30 and get that extra hour? And like the last few nights, because my CPAP machine, I think most are like this, they have a little timer clock on there to tell you how long your machine's been running. And so when I get 7.5 to 8, it's an amazing difference in the way I feel. I mean, how about with you, with your CPAP machine? How do you feel?
I feel wonderful using my CPAP. And on the 1 or 2 nights I've had where it was broken, I felt horrible.
Oh.
So I can really see the contrast, or like losing your glasses. You suddenly discover I can't see anything anymore. But the thing that people say is, how many hours should I use it? And I say, well, that's the wrong question. The real question is, how many hours don't you want to breathe? When you ask the question in that direction, the answer is absolutely crystal clear. Of course, I want to breathe all the time. So that's really, really important. If I ruled the world at age 50, not only would people get a colonoscopy or a mammogram or they'd also get a sleep study because the downstream savings would be incredible. But here's one other thing. All those studies for the new, very expensive medications for Alzheimer's disease that have just been, two of them have been FDA approved. Several of them have failed. Well, none of them check on the sleep status or the oxygen status of the people in their trials. Wouldn't it be interesting if the medications actually worked pretty well if you had enough oxygen?
Well, it's just like what you said with the analogy at the close of the last the last segment where we were talking about the beer can winding road analogy. You got a little more time here. Go ahead, because I only gave you a couple seconds, but for the new listeners that just jumped on the show, that's exactly the point. What was that story again?
The point was that we need to start early. We can't wait until somebody already has dementia to try to clean up what are perhaps not even the cause. People have been saying, it's beta amyloid plaques in our brain that's causing Alzheimer's disease because there's a lot of them in people who have Alzheimer's. So it sort of made sense to them that we get rid of the beta amyloid plaques, thinking would improve. So they do a really good job with the new pharmaceuticals in removing those plaques. It does not improve. In fact, in many cases, it barely slows down this freight train descending into Alzheimer's disease. So we got to look elsewhere. We're really barking up the wrong tree, in my opinion. And part of it is by starting early with prevention strategies. You may have heard the analogy, we can pull people out of the river once they've drowned, but wouldn't it be better to go upstream and stop them from falling in?
My man is like, he's the well of great analogies. I love this so much. That's why he's going to come back on this radio program. I'm going to carry this through here because I love that kind of theater of the mind stuff. When we come back, everybody, it's part 3 of the book. Save this perfect timing. Where you stand and what you can do about it. Now, this is really important to understand because there's a lot of conditions, and you need to get the book to kind of go through the whole thing because we're doing the high altitude today. As everybody knows with my first-time guests, we always do this high altitude overview. When Dr. Mitch comes back, we can deep dive several of these specific topics. But for today, we're doing the high altitude, as I said. Stick around. Come back, listen where you stand and what you can do about it. The Alzheimer's, dementia Alzheimer's condition with Dr. Mitch Clionsky. Dementia Prevention is his book. It's wonderful. It's awesome. You're listening to The Tom Matt Show.
Thank you again to our segment 4 sponsor, Brock Fletcher, real estate agent at the selling team with Keller Williams Realty. For more information on services provided by Brock, please call his personal cell phone at 517-303-3262 or by emailing Brock at kwsellingteam.com.
Fifth segment of the Tom Matt Show. We're going to get into where you stand, what you can do about it with the dementia Alzheimer's condition with Dr. Mitchell Clionsky. First, though, I want to remind everybody, if you want to get a hold of us, Sandy and I, topics for shows, comments, any of that stuff, TomMattShow.com is the one-stop shopping for all of our social media. I mean, it's all there. I had a student today. I sent her our link tree thing with all of our stuff. She was amazed. She was just like, wow, you guys really got it going on. I mean, was doing some TikTok stuff with some kids in the gym the other day, and one of the students was like, man, you're really good at this stuff. Well, when you spend a lot of time on this, older dogs can learn new tricks. and it's pretty funny when I'm better at TikTok than college students are, but you know what? To each his own, because we want to share our messaging. Okay. So please go to the website, TomMattShow.com, and check out any of the older podcasts that are over there. They're all there. Dr. Mitch, how would you like people to connect with you for speaking engagements, buy the book, connect with you, patient therapies, all of it? Well, please go right ahead. Take your time. Share all of that great information.
Well, for us, the unifying place is called BrainDoc, BrainDoc.com. And on there are biographies. On there are opportunities to connect with us. There's also a whole listing under the media tab for other podcasts and radio interviews. They're written up in the Washington Post. There's several other written kinds of descriptions and discussions in there. So that's probably the easiest way to learn about us. Someone wants to contact me more directly, the email is phd@braindoc.com. So that's the easiest. The book is everywhere. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's on a lot of local bookstores. It's in libraries. You can get it on Kindle. You can download it on your Apple device. It's also a really wonderful audiobook narrated by an actor by the name of Nan McNamara. If you like listening to your books, she does such a good job. I started listening to my book. There's a joke in the beginning that I wrote. It cracked me up. It was her reading it of it was so much better than I conceptualized it. So for people who like to listen, that's also wonderful. But however you get it, this is really more important than the book. It's really more important because it's more of a mission. My job right now is to not be limited to the one-to-one people I can interact with, but rather to reach larger people, because this is such an important topic that if we can intervene and make differences earlier in people's lives, we can literally change the face of America going forward in terms of its healthcare. So that's why I'm excited about this.
Well, what Dr. Mitch said earlier, everybody, Dr. Mitch Clionsky is with us. Dementia Prevention is his book, the title of today's episode. If 1 out of 2 cases could be preventable, then we need to jump all over this. It's because this is a huge issue, a massive issue that we need to really come to grips with. And we just got to do the big lift, as I like to say. You got to do the lift. You got to put in the effort. You got to do the reading. You got to read like section 3 in the book, where you stand and what you can do about it. Okay, Mitch, the rest of this whole segment, the rest of this radio program is about all of preventable tips and ideas that you have out there for people. Can you please go ahead and just give them as much as you got, and I'll give you the signal when we're coming up close. But this is the time where people are really going to need to listen up. So go right ahead, please.
So the first thing is figuring out where you stand. And for that, the easiest way to do that is to download a free dementia prevention checklist. It's 25 questions long. that are on our website. You can either download it as a PDF, go up to braindoc.com, download the checklist, or you can fill it out interactively online. So right now, what you'll get from that is where you stand on each of these different dimensions. What we're going to be doing in probably the next 4 to 6 weeks is a newer version of this. Same questions, but now it's also going to allow you to put it into a visual context where you can see where you stand in each of these different areas. I'm hoping that'll also drive people to then say, okay, here's where I need to be improving. This makes sense because this interacts with this area. I'm going to work on that. And hopefully we'll get a bunch of people who are behavioral coaches use this as a playbook for then helping the people they work with to make changes in their lives. So that's number one. The other thing that I think is really important is figuring out how to make change and recognizing that as we age, adaptation, change is not only important, but it's really critical to our survival. We don't think about it. We get into midlife, many of us, and we think, okay, that's it. I figured it out. Put a fork in me. I'm done. And that's not a good strategy. There is life beyond retirement. There's life beyond midlife for most of us, if we're lucky. And we have to keep changing because everything about us, our style, our bodies, our thinking abilities have to grow with the times so that we don't fall behind the times. So we talk in the book, I talk as being a behavioral scientist about how you take change. How do you turn those resolutions that you try to make in New Year's into something you can actually achieve? Because I deal with this all the time dealing with patients. They say, well, I know I should be doing this, and I know I should be doing that. I should be exercising more. I should be sleeping more regularly. I should be losing weight. I should be making my normal activities more involved with other people. And I say, so what's the problem here? Well, I don't know. I'm sort of waiting. I don't know what's going to happen. And I say, that's the wrong attitude. Let's break this down. Let's turn this into an action plan. So that's what we try to offer in the last part of the book, is how to take some of those difficult habits to develop and turn them into doable, achievable habits. Because that's what's really going to make the difference. It's not enough to read it and say, oh, yeah, I'm pretty good here and I'm not so good there. If that doesn't motivate you to do something about it, guess what? You're losing out. So that's what I'm really hoping we're going to accomplish, is using this as a platform.
I love it. What Dr. Mitchell Clionsky is our guest today, everybody, Dementia Prevention. Everything that you've done in your prior years, earlier in your life, will add up to the potentials of all kinds of different things. And again, there's no guarantee for anything in life. But, and I mentioned to Dr. Mitch in our pre-call yesterday, Dr. George Bartzokas, one of my early mentors with the radio program, and he talked about better odds. He just said, Tom, you just got to give yourself better odds. Do you like that kind of the better odds, the short, sweet line like that, Mitch? Do you think that fits?
I love that. I think that is absolutely true, because as we talk about, you can't necessarily prevent something. All you can do is stack the deck in your favor. And if you're doing that, that's the best you can do. When people talk about, well, I'm going to get a test to see if I've got the Alzheimer's genes, or I'm going to find out if I have too much beta amyloid in my blood, because there's now tests for doing that. And my response is, so what does that mean? You're going to try harder now to prevent dementia? And you wouldn't have tried so hard if you didn't have the gene? So that doesn't really make sense. All it's going to do is worry you. What you really want to do is look and see, okay, what am I doing here? Am I drinking too much alcohol? Have I had my hearing tested? Because we now know that hearing loss is a cause for dementia. Am I breathing well enough while I'm sleeping? What's my hemoglobin A1C, the level of sugar in my blood over the last 90 days? Am I pre-diabetic? Because that's not good. Am I still smoking cigarettes at this late stage in the world? So there's and what am I taking over the counter to help me to sleep? Because I'm not really treating my sleep apnea, but I'm numbing myself to stay asleep through most of the night. So all those things we talk about in the book, all of those are really important. All of them require motivation and some beginnings of change.
There's so many variables that go into this. One of the things I mentioned to Mitch in our pre-call yesterday, everybody, was my mother-in-law, God rest her soul, love her to death. She's awesome. But the contraindication that you get with all of these medications that she was taking, she was kind of one of the old school people that if she didn't hear what she wanted to from her physician, she'd go to another physician, she'd get another prescription. But nobody was managing the prescriptions. And if you don't have somebody managing the prescriptions, now how do you know if there's contraindications going on? Mitch, we're coming up on the close of the show here. I'd like you to please comment on that and give me a quick takeaway. What's your thought on that with medications?
Medication reconciliation, making sure everyone's on the same page with what someone's actually taking, including the stuff they're buying without a prescription, is really important. It was supposed to be solved by having these electronic medical records. In my practice, I find that it is rarely solved, and that I have to sit down as part of my job and say, okay, here's what this note says, but here's the specialist note that says you're taking something else, and you're telling me you're taking other things. Well, let's get all this straight, because other than that, we're not going to know what to change or what to tell you to continue. So yeah, I really do think that and oftentimes it can be, you can improve your cognition simply by knowing what you should be taking and what you shouldn't.
So there you go. Medication, what was it? Medication?
Reconciliation. Getting everyone on the same page.
Medication reconciliation. What's a 30-second takeaway you'd like to give, and then we'll make sure we get you back, Mitch. Please go right ahead.
Dementia is really important. Progressive loss of thinking is not what you want in your future. Good news is large-scale studies tell us that 40 to 60% can be prevented. That's 1 in 2. We have information that's scientifically valid. Forget the fads. We can tell you based on the science what to do.
If our show fits your business or group's mission, we want to be of service to you through our guests like a Dr. Mitchell Clionsky. So awesome to have him come into the show. You want to get his book, Dementia Prevention. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Always remember, before you can share love with others, you must love yourself first. I want to thank Dr. Mitch for coming in. Sandy, Matt, Craig Stiles, Brock Fletcher, Mitch Anderson, of course, Jamie White with White Law. Talk to everybody next weekend. Thank you so much for joining us, being a fan of the show, doing everything that you do. Have a great week, everybody. Go out and ignite your life. Remember, the Tom Matt Show is a production of Boomers Rock Media. We want to bring your story to life. Thank you for listening and watching. We're out.
The Tom Matt Show is produced by Mitch Anderson of Black Circle Studios. Original music from the Source of Light and Power by the Ark of All.